What's up everyone and welcome back to another video. Today it is my goal to get this WRX wagon started and so that you can hear it run for the first time. I'm not sure that we'll be able to get it on the road today. I do have the alignment still to do. I probably have to adjust my coilovers as well, and I still have to bleed the brakes. So I'm not sure that I'll be able to get to all that. I do have several hoses and things that I have to replace in this engine bay before we can start putting things back on, like the turbo inlet, the manifold, the intercooler, and intake. So I'm just gonna start busting that stuff out, and I'll kind of keep you updated as I go to show you the things that I have replaced and why. I did purchase new hoses for the power steering system. There is this hose right here that you just saw me install that goes to the pump from the reservoir, and then the return line here. This hose I also replaced. It's a brand new OEM hose. They were both really old and crusty, and it looked like there was some cracking on them, so I just wanted to get those replaced. Also have a new power steering high pressure line right here. This is an IAG. The one that came on this car was not OEM, and it was leaking from the old power steering rack, so I just wanted to get it replaced. Plus these things look a lot nicer in the engine bay. So unfortunately I'm not going to be able to show you guys the install of the power steering rack and pinion. I actually did that a few days ago, and I filmed the whole process, and I was going to make a video showing you how to do that, but unfortunately I accidentally deleted all of that footage off of my card, and so now I can't make that video for you. So I won't be able to show you that, but it is installed, and I do have our new power steering high pressure line hooked up to the rack and ready to go. So I'm just gonna start by installing the other end of the line to this pump. So this IAG line did come with this fitting. When you unscrew your banjo bolt from your OEM fitting, you can just screw this thing right in there, and it did come with crush washers, which is pretty cool. You probably can honestly make your own high pressure line if you're willing to risk it. I would just be careful because you know, these high pressure lines, when I looked it up, they see pressures of like, I think like 1200 to 1500 PSI. So if you're gonna do that, just be sure that whatever you're using can tolerate those pressures. Otherwise you're gonna have a blowout in your power steering line. So I didn't feel like risking that, and I had a little bit of room in the budget for this thing to just get a pre-made line with all the fittings from IAG. Good. So this is the inlet that came on the car. It is really worn out, and there's a bunch of cracking around some of these fittings, and so I decided to go ahead and replace it with this brand new Tomei inlet. And this thing is really nice. It's a lot more rigid. And so we're gonna throw that bad boy on now. First I'm gonna get some clamps on all of these, because these can leak. These Tomei ones can leak if you don't put clamps. And they come with all the clamps for these fittings, so you may as well use them. All right, so got the inlet, got the rubber fitting. That over. It can be a little tricky to keep this thing from sort of like folding, so you gotta just sort of take your time. I only know that because I've installed one of these before, so way easier without a manifold though. We got a pretty good seal. We're gonna tighten the shit out of this clamp. Next up, bypass valve hose to the inlet. We'll throw that bad boy on and tighten her down. All right, so I have the manifold installed. I torqued everything down to spec, and I've worked on getting everything like tucked out of the way, all the fuel lines tightened, the wiring harness clips plugged in. Moved this so that our guard can fit the power steering line. I just kind of loosened this up and then moved it over here. Tucked our wiring harness down over here and then tucked it in the back, routed it around there, and just tried to tuck everything nice and neat underneath the fuel rail because there's so many like wires and hoses coming out of this spot. I just wanted it to be as clean as it could be. But yeah, it's looking pretty good and I've made a ton of progress. I do have a little ways to go. I got to install the breather hose that goes here to this fitting and clamp that down. We still have to install the upper coolant reservoir right here. And obviously our intercooler needs to get mounted up. And then the bypass valve installed to that. In addition to that, I also need to, I'm gonna redo these boost lines. The ones that come with this Grimmspeed boost controller that I have down in here, that's a brand new 3-port boost controller from Grimmspeed. But for some reason, these vacuum lines, they just don't hold up. I don't like that. Like Grimmspeed has really good quality control, but the vacuum lines they supply with these, I tear them all the time, and I have had several of them blow right off of the wastegate here because it just like tore it when I was under boost. And that's a bad thing because if you don't have that vacuum line hooked up to the wastegate, oftentimes your boost is like unrestricted and you can make way too much boost and blow your motor up. All right, so before I get any further on this, I'm going to check to see if we have any fuel leaks when I prime the fuel system. I just plugged back in our fuel pump relay and hooked up my battery. And so I'm just gonna turn the key to the on position, wait for the fuel pump to prime, and then I'm just gonna check out here and see if I notice anything leaking. Obviously, like there'll be more pressure in the system once I actually like start the car, but I just wanna make sure that there's no leaking from it just priming, because if there is, then it's gonna leak even worse once it's started up, so. Oh, this one is leaking. So if you look right down in there, you can see that little pool of gasoline. It doesn't look like it's coming from the fuel rail. It honestly looks like it's coming from the top of the injector where it inserts into the fuel rail. So I'm gonna have to investigate this and get this sorted out before we move forward. All right, so I have pulled the injectors, as you can see. They're sitting right here, and they honestly look fine. And I'm pretty surprised because these are all new O-rings. Every single one on here. This one as well as this top one, and then the ones that go inside of the TGVs. All brand new OEM O-rings. I don't really know what that was about. I guess I'm just gonna pop them back in and double check the torque specs on those from the IAG website and try it again and see what happens. Maybe it just wasn't seated in there correctly. It is possible that the bottom O-ring, like that goes inside of the TGV, those sometimes don't sit flat if you don't pay attention when you put them in. So maybe it was just a little bit hung up, and so this thing wasn't seated correctly and there was fuel getting past the top. I did notice, I stuck my finger under there while they were still in there with the glove on, and I kind of rubbed the top of where the injector meets the fuel rail, and that's where it was wet, so it was like coming out of the top for sure. But there's no tears in the O-rings. There's nothing to indicate that it would be because the injector failed. So yeah, let's just double check the torque specs and toss these bad boys back in and see what happens. I just double checked on IAG's website. It does have instructions for these injectors, and the torque specs are 14.1 foot-pounds, which I believe is what I did, so. Okay, so far so good. I think we're okay. All right guys, so it is the next day. One thing that I wanted to mention is that I'd unplugged the engine harness clips that go to the injectors when I took them out, and I didn't plug them back in when I went to prime the system, so of course they wouldn't leak because they weren't actually like functioning because they weren't hooked up. So I tried it again with them plugged in, and it was leaking still. And so I decided to just try to torque them down a little bit tighter. I added 5 more foot-pounds, and I don't know if it's something different with like the finish on these RCM TGVs. Basically just torqued them down to about 20 foot-pounds and it fixed it. They're not leaking. I'm checking where our vacuum lines go for our Grimmspeed 3-port boost controller. I always forget. So 3 goes to the turbo, 2 goes to the wastegate, 1 goes to the inlet. All right, I'm gonna get those cut. Turbo Smart vacuum line. It's 4mm internal diameter. Should be good, should work, should do the job. This stuff definitely feels a lot stronger. Now I always zip tie these here on the boost controller, and then especially the ones that are on the turbo. And the wastegate one is super important. You don't want that line blowing off there because then your boost is like basically unrestricted, I believe. So dangerous for the motor if you do that. All right, 3-port is all hooked up. Got all my boost lines zip tied in place. Next up is my coolant expansion tank. We're replacing the hose that goes to the turbo. Alright guys, so I have the engine bay mostly buttoned up. It's looking pretty clean. I'm gonna wait to put in our sprayer jug over there. I actually painted it black, so it should flow really well with the engine bay. And we also have the intake duct that'll go right here. Also gonna wait on that just because it's easier to see if there's leaks and such without that stuff on here. So next, all I need to do is plug in our ECU and hook up the battery and try to flash our Basemap on there, and then we can try to fire it up. Jeez. Let's get this junk out of here. And this ECU is used, so I just hope that the seller I purchased it from is legit. All right, plug in our connector. What are you doing, bud? Tactrix cable, check. Let's go. Can, right. All right, here we go. Let's see if this will work. It's attempting to flash it right now, so success if you are done. All right, it appears to have worked, so we are all good. Let's get these things unplugged. Next, we just have to unplug the crankshaft position sensor, and we'll build some oil pressure, and then we'll plug it back in, and then we can attempt to start this bad boy up. All right, let's get this thing unplugged. Oh, nice, it's already unplugged. Sweet. That makes life easy. Looks pretty good. I'll do one more. All right, let's go plug her back in. All right, so about to attempt the first start. I won't be able to let it idle for too long because we don't have any coolant or water in the system yet. But I'll start it up, let it idle, look around for some leaks, and and then we'll shut it off pretty soon after that. So far, so good. It is throwing a check engine light though, so I gotta investigate that. AFRs look good. All right, let's open up ROM Raider here. Do you want to read? Yes. Crankshaft position sensor malfunction. Huh. I wonder why. Let me go just double check it. All right, so I just unplugged the crankshaft position sensor and then replugged it in, made sure I heard like a nice click. And so I'm gonna go ahead and reset that code on the ECU. So it'll go away. There shouldn't be a check engine light after that. And then if it comes back, then we will know that that sensor is probably bad. I mean, it is likely 20 years old after all, so it's possible it was never replaced. So it doesn't look like it's going to take any more water than that for now. So I'm going to go ahead and fire it back up and let it idle relearn the Basemap. a little high, but hopefully as it relearns, that will improve and it'll drop to like 900 or so. And you'll notice the check engine light is gone now. I did reset it, but it hasn't come back yet, so that's a good sign. All right, guys, so I let it idle for a while, and everything seems to be working really well. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video here. I don't have time to work on the rest of the things I need to get done in order to get this car on the road. Like, I have the outer tie rod ends to install, and I also have to do the alignment. So I still have quite a few things to get done before we can actually drive this thing. So please like and subscribe, and keep your eyes peeled for the next video that should be coming out shortly here in the next week. And hopefully in that video, we will be able to get everything buttoned up on this thing so we actually go test drive it. Thanks for joining me. Really appreciate it. And until next time, peace out, everybody.